Hello and welcome to my coverage of the under 1500 ladder rating Oceania tournament I played on. In this video, I'm going to provide a brief summary over my games. I'll also summarize my tournament experience in general, and we're going to derive some learnings. My first game has been against Pornmaster, and it's actually a round 2 game because we didn't have the ideal number of participants for everyone to play in round 1. So I started playing this tournament in round 2. And that actually gave me a lot of time to prepare for this very game. And I sandboxed a couple of opening build orders just to make sure I get everything right. And what you're going to see here is actually a build order efficiency war. So Pornmaster went for light assault bots. You can see one here. There is another one here. And well, obvious raid is obvious. That was not a great opening because on Theta Passage, you want to build up a time and scale based production lead pretty much by having lots of factories around your Hydra. As you can see, I'm one land factory ahead of my opponent right now. So this early raid really slowed down his build. Plus, what could you possibly raid? Well, the first couple of engineers are either not expanding because they're going to be building factories close to the Hydra or reclaiming close to the Hydra, or they will be expanding and they will be protected by then because you can simply afford this tank protection by that time. So his opening really slowed him down. And now you can see I have a small production lead against him that is mainly time based. He's on 5 land factories. I'm on 5 land factories too now. I also have 1 air factory. Well, he does not have air yet. And I'm not realizing fast enough that I have this air control. So my first bomber is my 4th or 5th air unit I'm building, and that's a little too late. But it still did its job, killed some engineers. Small mistake over here, there was no scout with these units, so they couldn't fire at their maximum range. But as you can see, my production lead allowed me to get this extra map control, and it just magnified over time. Pornmaster not really in a great position to win without air. His engineers got bombed, and that's why he tried attacking me with his ACU, ended up dying very fast. So this game, if I had to narrow down what happened here, this was really just a build order efficiency. And I attribute this mainly to the preparation time I had. Now let us go through game 2 very quickly. Playing on Badlands against XenoJade, and I have a map-specific build order for Badlands. It's a map Mozart's dual land Hydra rush into fast 3rd air. So this build order is great because it has a decent chance at building up a time-based production lead in land units as well as a time-based production lead in air units. And you can see this is burning the entire power and the entire mass without really stalling. So perhaps a little bit mistake in the execution. Should have micromanaged this engineer better with manual reclaim so that this -10 stall is shorter or doesn't exist to begin with. But you can see what's going on here now. So I have 5 tanks on this side, and well, his raid got killed. His other raid is going to run into my ACU. So land-wise, I'm ahead already. His initial factory has been making this this early raid, but now switched into engineers, so no more tanks for him. His second factory is producing tanks again, but you can see my tanks are already on his side of the map, raiding his expansion. And now you can see dogfight is happening, same number of interceptors, but my interceptors are in a slightly better position, so now I actually have air control and a land-based production lead. And this land production lead is entirely time-based initially, because like I had these 2 land factories while he was still on 1, and that 1 factory was mainly making engineers. That explains why I had this tank production lead, right? And of course, he sees I have more tanks than him, and I managed to have so many tanks so much earlier than him. And of course, when your opponent has a time-based production lead, then your only choice pretty much, if the opponent makes good use of that time-based production lead, is trying to build up a scale-based production lead. So you cannot change anymore that your opponent had started making tanks earlier, but you can simply get more tank producing factories yourself, and that's how you catch up. And this is exactly what XenoJade is doing, but you can see that in this case my time-based production lead is beating his attempt to achieve scale, because I'm putting it to good use. My tanks are already raiding his mass extractors, and with this level of map control he cannot possibly hope to operate this number of factories. So once again, this game came down entirely to build order efficiency, and you could say that XenoJade is actually a very good player. I had lots of training games against him, and he managed to beat me in a lot of them. But in this very game, he simply lacked the ticket to stay in it to begin with, because without such a good competitive build order that allows you to play this map, you're just sort of going to die. Now, I have maybe 60% map control, he has around 30% map control at best, and it's sort of easy to buy harps from that. T1 transport's ready to ferry them over, and he realizes that he can't win this one anymore, and he's just going to give up now. In game number 3, now this one is a little more difficult and less obvious. I'd say that WoundedElk actually has the better expansion style and opening build order. I'm going engineer first, and I'm trying to get this mid reclaim on Regor. I think this engineer not really worth it, and you can see I'm not defending it either. And he is going for third tank, and that one is going to kill this engineer before it really arrives and does stuff. See, my protection is just way too late. It gets killed. And of course the first engineer you send is going to be way more important than let's say a third tank or something like that, because your first unit has a lot of time to do stuff, but if it wastes this time traveling and doesn't manage to do anything once it arrives, then this is of course wasted. In mass cost, this engineer returned its own cost 4 times over, but a first engineer can simply do much more. So this was sort of a waste and not very well done on my end. And by the looks of it, WoundedElk has this production lead against me now. So he's deciding to raid the expansion over here. But since he's attacking 2 factories with just 4 tanks, he's not going to be able to beat the tankiness of these factories. So not really anything he can hope to destroy. So he could have tried to use his time-based production lead better, perhaps by sending some units towards the right side and raiding over here. But simply due to the map size, time-based production lead apparently not particularly great. And I'm going full spam pretty much, with just 1 air factory. He has air control, and not really realizing that, and not really using air offensively. Like, he has this transport that he's using to expand. He even kills his civilians over here to get reclaim and another expansion. But he's not investing into bombers, so he's sort of wasting his air control there. And of course, if he's going T2 land, which he pretty much has to do as a Siren against Aeon, then he's going to have way less units than me with this T2 investment and air investment. So I have a T1 production lead now, and what you can see here is also a defeat in detail over and over again. He's streaming small groups of units into my large army, and since my firepower is more concentrated and the Aurora have this range advantage that further increases the density of this army every unit is shooting, while not every unit of him is even in range to shoot at me, he's just wasting his units on this army, including T2 even. Like, those T2 tanks also die in the defeat and detail situation. Now he realized he has air control, made a bomber, but there's T1 stationary anti-air now. And his ACU overextended just a little bit into those point defenses. Took like 3,000 or 4,000 damage. And now I have units around it, and he doesn't really. I'm not sure why he's keeping the units back so much. But my tanks get lots of free hits, and my plan is to just switch my entire tank production into light assault bots instead and get ghetto gunships to kill him. But as you can see, it was not even necessary. So his ACU just died. So this game in summary was just defeat and detail. He had his units in the wrong spots and kept sending small groups into large groups, and that's how he lost. Tournament game number 4, and this is again against WoundedElk. The tournament is a double elimination, and we had to play twice against each other. And Red Rocks is actually a very strange map. So, and there are some spots where you have cliffs, such as here, so you cannot build your Hydra and your mass extractors directly, and getting this reclaim over here is also not going to be possible unless you use a transport or you cliff build by exploiting the build range of your engineers or the ACU. And there are cliffs over here too, so you cannot leave the island unless you go over this beach over here. So you can see it's flatter here, but the amphibious units won't be able to travel here. And you just have to know this weird terrain of the map to play well on it. And well, WoundedElk and me actually have the same idea initially. We tried to build up a production lead in air units. You can see both of us are assisting the air factory. He's assisting it more heavily, but he started later. That's why we have the same number of interceptors. But you can see I'm overestimating my fast air, and I'm building this bomber. So this bomber just killed a single engineer, and the ACU's in the area too, and the ACU's just going to continue building these factories. So this bomber didn't pay off. And when you have two players who both heavily assist their air factory with engineers, then the player who is going to make a bomber first is going to lose air control. And I actually made 2 bombers even, so I'm behind in air control. And I also made this transport hoping I could get the island, but I realized that I was flying with that transport over his scout coverage, so he knows the transport is coming and he's going to shoot it down. So WoundedElk now has guaranteed air control. I'm trying to build a second air factory, and I'm also investing into land units, hoping that I can stay in the game. But with such an air production lead, it's definitely going to be difficult. So this transport was a huge mistake, that I had to emergency land it instead of just going for the island. I should have shot down the scout first, or just not gone for these bombers. But look at that, he actually made a mistake too. And his mistake is to drop his own plateau with a transport instead of going for the islands. So when he had air control, he used his air control to make the transport. That's the right decision. But instead of going for this island, he went for the plateau first. And the plateau is something you can reach by cliff building. And that's perhaps because he didn't know the map. I don't know. Or because he just messed up somehow. But that was not a good use of the transport. And the expansion could have started repaying its own cost sooner if he had cliff built his own expansion. So what has happened now? Well, here we have T1 mobile anti-air units with lots of kills. You know that I'm a huge fan of sophisticated unit compositions, and T1 anti-air can't swim over this water. And when I queued up the unit compositions here, I made well, compositions without RT and anti-air for obvious reasons. And that felt so strange for me that I added one factory on this island that only made anti-air and some RT. And WoundedElk was using his air over this area, and flew over 71 mobile anti-air turrets. And that sort of costed him air control. I got back into the air game by adding one more factory, and this bad air engagement pretty much costed him the game. So we both didn't play very well at the beginning. We were both power stalling at some point. We both had this transport fail. My transport got shot down. His transport went to the wrong expansion. But now it's really going to come down to this loss of air control. So my T2 gunships, which I just built, killed his T1 land units. Now I have T1 land units in the area that are going to damage the ACU. And there's still some gunships left to attack his ACU. And since he had already lost air control, mainly because of unit compositions, because he operated over the land army, he assumed not to have anti-air mixed in it. He's getting killed now. So even if he had made it into the water, a air production lead as large as this is nothing you recover from on Red Rocks. I could have simply switched into torpedo bombers, which I was actually doing already, and killed the ACU over there. And I was also ready to calm drop on top of his plateau perhaps, or on his island or wherever, even the main base, since there's just a single factory. So unit compositions and the related loss of air control made WoundedElk lose this game in the end. I hope you enjoyed the summary of my games. What can we conclude? Well, what I said about build orders in the generic build orders video for beginners is actually true. My opponents were more or less on the same ladder rating as me, and as you may know, ladder rating is the more accurate measure for skill than global rating. And why is it that in the first two games I won so easily? Well, and this is because I had a map-specific build order on a map that required a map-specific build order, and my opponents simply did not have a map-specific build order. I don't think that my opponents were significantly less skilled than me. It was really just that I had this build order, which is sort of the ticket to compete on these maps, and they didn't have it. That's why these build orders are so important. What can we say about game number 3 and 4? Well, we had some super obvious mistakes. For example, on Regor, I didn't really have air control, my opponent didn't use it. Or we had this defeat in detail situation going on for more or less the entire game on Regor. What about game 4? Well, on game 4, we again had some map-specific problems, but also both my opponent and me were power stalling for longer periods. For example, I was trying to get first land and 2 air factories on just 8 power generators, which is obviously not going to work, even if one of the air factories is producing engineers. And we both had this transport fail going on. That was a sort of major. He expanded to his own plateau, my transport got shot down. And later on he stayed with his interceptors over T1 mobile anti-air, a pretty large group actually, for way too long, and he had time to retreat. So why is it that these very obvious and simple mistakes and concepts decide tournaments like that? I call it the 50% rule of training and battle. So let me give some examples. Your training is playing some 1v1 games against a friend you trust, and this is how you form your potential for the tournament. And your battle is going to be the tournament. We call it battle because it's going to be one of the first tournaments you ever play, or perhaps even the very first one. And the 50% rule states that your performance in the tournament is going to be 50% of your training potential at best. And you can apply this to other situations too. Let's say your training is playing against AI, and your battle is going to be one of your first team games with actual people. Then you're also going to be performing at 50% of your training potential at best. This is how this 50% rule works. And if you keep that in mind, it is clear why some of the mistakes that happen in the tournament were extremely obvious and easy to avoid. They simply happened due to stress. And I think one of the main reasons I won this tournament was that I had a little more tournament experience than some of my competitors. So the 50% rule still applied to me, but not as much as to the others. And that's how I won in the end. I hope, however, that this does not discourage you from playing tournaments yourself. There is a first time for everything. We have to start somewhere. And I hope you enjoyed this little tournament journal. And I hope you're going to have your first tournament experience soon. And tell me about it in the comments.